And we're back for Story of the Day for Year 3 to Year 6 with Roald Dahl's George's Marvellous Medicine. Chapter 6, Grandma Gets the Medicine. Grandma sat hunched in her chair by the window. The wicked little eyes followed George closely as he crossed the room towards her. "You're late!" she snapped. "I don't think I am, Grandma." "Don't interrupt me in the middle of a sentence," she shouted. "But you'd finished your sentence, Grandma." "There you go again," she cried. "Always interrupting and arguing. You really are a tiresome little boy. What is the time?" "It's exactly 11 o'clock, Grandma." "You're lying as usual. Stop talking so much and give me the medicine. Shake the bottle first, then pour it onto the spoon and make sure it's a whole spoonful." "Are you going to gulp it all in one go?" George asked her. "Or will you sip at it?" "What I do is none of your business," the old woman said. "Fill the spoon." As George removed the cork and began to slowly pour the thick brown stuff into the spoon, he couldn't help thinking back upon all the mad and marvellous things that had gone into the making of this crazy stuff. "Open your mouth wide, Grandma," he said, "and I'll pop it in." The old hag opened her small wrinkled mouth, showing her disgusting pale brown teeth. "Here we go," George cried out. "Swallow it down." He pushed the spoon well into her mouth and tipped the mixture down her throat. Then he stepped back to watch the result. It was worth watching. Grandma yelled, "Ow!" and her whole body shot up in a whoosh in the air. It was exactly as though someone had pushed an electric wire through the underneath of her chair and switched on the current. Up she went like a jack-in-the-box. And she didn't come down. She stayed there, suspended in mid-air, about 2 feet up. Still in a sitting position, but rigid now, frozen, quivering, her eyes bulging, hair standing straight up on end. "Is something wrong, Grandma?" George asked her politely. "Are you all right?" Suspended up there in space, the old girl was beyond speaking. The shock of George's marvellous mixture that George had given her must have been tremendous. You'd have thought she'd have swallowed a red-hot poker the way she took off from the chair. Then she came down again with a plop, back in her seat. "Call the fire brigade!" she shouted suddenly. "My stomach's on fire!" "It's just the medicine, Grandma," George said. "It's good, strong stuff." "Fire!" the old woman yelled. "Fire in the basement! Get a bucket! Man the hoses! Do something quick!" "Call it, Grandma," George said. But he got a bit of a shock when he saw smoke coming out of her mouth and out of her nostrils. Clouds of black smoke were coming out of her nose and blowing around the room. "By golly, you really are on fire," George said. "Of course I'm on fire!" she yelled. "I'll be burned to a crisp. I'll be fried to a frizzle. I'll be boiled like a beetroot." George ran into the kitchen and came back with a jug of water. "Open your mouth, Grandma," he cried. He could hardly see her for all the smoke, but he still managed to pour half a jugful down her throat. A sizzling sound, the kind you get if you hold a hot frying pan under a cold tap, came from deep down in Grandma's stomach. The old hag buckled and snorted. She gasped and gurgled. Spouts of water came shooting out of her, and the smoke cleared away. "The fire's out," George announced proudly. "You'll be all right now, Grandma." "All right!" she yelled. "Who's all right? There's Jackie jumpers in my tummy, there's squigglers in my belly, there's bangers in my bottom." She began bouncing up and down in the chair, quite obvious that she was not comfortable. "You'll find it's going to do a lot of good, that medicine, Grandma," George said. "Good!" she screamed. "Doing me good! It's killing me!" Then she began to bulge. She was swelling. She was puffing up all over. Someone was pumping her up. That's how it looked. Was she going to explode? Her face was turning from purple to green. But wait, she had a puncture somewhere. George could hear the hiss of escaping air. She stopped swelling. She was going down. And she was slowly getting thinner again, shrinking back down to her shrivelly old self. "How's things?" George said. No answer. Then something funny happened. Grandma's body gave a sudden sharp twist and a sudden sharp jerk, and she flipped herself clear out of the chair and landed neatly on her 2 feet on the carpet. "That's terrific, Grandma," George cried. "You haven't stood up like that for years. Look at you. You're standing up all on your own and you're not even using a stick." Grandma didn't hear him. The frozen, pop-eyed look was back with her again now. She was miles away in another world. Marvellous medicine, George told himself. He found it fascinating to stand there, watching what it was doing to the old hag. What next, he wondered. He soon found out. Suddenly she began to grow. It was quite slow at first, just a very gradual inching upwards, up, inch by inch, getting taller and taller, about an inch every few seconds, and in the beginning George didn't notice it. But when she had passed 5'6" mark and going up towards being 6 feet tall, George gave a jump and shouted, "Hey, Grandma, you're growing, you're going up. Hang on, Grandma, you better stop now or you'll be hitting the ceiling." But Grandma didn't stop. It was a truly fantastic sight, this ancient, scrawny old woman getting taller and taller, longer and longer, thinner and thinner, as though she were a piece of elastic being pulled upwards by visible hands. When the top of her head actually touched the ceiling, George thought she was bound to stop. But she didn't. There was a sort of scrunching noise, and bits of plaster and cement came raining down. "Hadn't you better stop now, Grandma?" George said. "Daddy's just had this whole room repainted." But there was no stopping her. Soon her head and shoulders were completely disappearing through the ceiling. George dashed upstairs into his own bedroom, and there she was, coming up through the floor like a mushroom. "Whoopee!" she shouted, finding her voice at last. "Hallelujah, here I come!" "Steady on, Grandma," George said. "With a hey-dee-nonny-noo, up we go!" she shouted. "Just watch me grow." "This is my room," George said. "Look at the mess you're making." "Terrific medicine!" she cried. "Give me some more." "She's dotty as a doughnut," George thought. "Come on, boy, give me some more," she yelled. "Dish it out, I'm slowing down." George was still clutching the medicine bottle in one hand and a spoon in the other. Oh, well, he thought, why not? He poured out a second dose and popped it into her mouth. "Ow!" She screamed up, and up she went again. Her feet were still on the floor downstairs in the living room, but her head was moving quickly towards the ceiling of the bedroom. "I'm on my way now," she called down to George. "Just watch me go." "That's the attic above you, Grandma," George called out. "I'd keep out of there. It's full of bugs and horrible stuff." Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as though it were butter. George stood in his bedroom gazing at the shambles. There was a big hole in the floor, another in the ceiling, and sticking up like a post between the two was the middle part of Grandma. Her legs were in the room below, her head in the attic. "I'm still going," came the screechy voice from above. "Give me another dose, boy, and let's go through the roof." "No, Grandma, no," George called back. "You're busting up the whole house." "To heck with the house," she shouted. "I want some fresh air. I haven't been outside for 20 years. "By golly, she's going to go through the roof," George told himself. He ran downstairs. He rushed out the back door into the yard. It would simply be awful, he thought, if she bashed through the roof of the wall. His father would be furious. And he, George, would get the blame. He had made the medicine. He had given her too much. "Don't come through the roof, Grandma," he prayed. "Please don't." And tomorrow we'll pick up for Chapter 7, The Brown Hen.